It's Thursday, September 19th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Climate Week, Day 4, folks. Today, full call-in. We're asking you, what changes in the ocean have you noticed in your parts of the province? And if you have solutions, adaptation, or mitigation ideas, big or small, get in touch with us. The lines are open. So I started the week with this little kind of a spiel here, and I'll just kind of re-rack and kind of say it again for folks if you're just tuning in here today for Climate Week. So like I said, this is the fourth day of it. Second year doing this, right? 5 days where climate change is the focus. We talk about the climate crisis, climate emergencies, you name it. We're talking about it. Now, when it comes to what is happening, you can easily feel despair, feel overwhelmed by the force of it, feel sometimes like it's a losing battle. But this week here on this show, we're talking about climate action. And yes, there's context that is necessary for that, but we're squarely in the action side of things. Folks who are putting the work in, working towards solutions, working to understand things from activism, which was we started the week with on Monday, to field work. The voices this week have a common thread, the will and the want to fix the planet. If you want to join us, and like I said, that question for today, what ocean changes have you noticed, right? Newfoundland and Labrador. On the Northern Peninsula, what have you noticed over the years, right? Avalon Peninsula, Labrador, the North Coast, you name it, South Coast, Southern Shore. Folks, get in touch with us. And if you, like I said, have ideas on fixes, changes, solutions, ways to adapt and mitigate, we want to hear about it. 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Those are the numbers to call. You can text us, 709-327-8206. And I think the text line is open. I'm just looking at John Pike and Nabila Qureshi there, getting a nod. Excellent. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Rex Hallwell is on the line, manager, Nunatsiavut Operations Nain with Smart Ice. Rex, how you doing?
Good afternoon. Good, and you?
Good. Thanks for coming on the show. Give folks just a little introduction of yourself and Smart Ice, and we can, and then I'll get to my next guest as well, Holly Hogan, who's sitting here in studio with me. But give folks a little explanation, and then we'll drill down into it a bit.
Yes. So, like you mentioned, my name is Rex Howell. I work with Smart Ice up in Nain. So pretty much as far away from you in town as you can get. So working here in Nain, living here in Nain, I've noticed climate change in my 40 plus years. Living in Nain, and in my 40 plus years, I can definitely see climate change happening in my personal life, in regards to the sea ice and how much shorter it's been getting here in Northern Labrador. And with my current work with Smart Ice, we travel on the sea ice. We measure sea ice in the hopes of the data that we're collecting will help the people who travel the sea ice to hunt, to fish, and to practice their culture, with the hopes that they're taking their data and adding it to their traditional knowledge to help keep them safe while traveling on the sea ice, to help keep their culture alive.
The sea ice being that Great Northern Highway system, essentially, for folks, right?
Oh, really it is. I mean, we travel on the sea ice to go to hunt for food, to go get wood. So really, and Nain is on a peninsula, so it's in 360 degrees. We have to travel on the sea ice. So the sea ice is really, like you said, our highway to get out of the community to all of these areas to practice our culture and to hunt and to fish.
What's the weather like today in Nain, by the way?
Today it is raining.
Okay, same here in St. John's. All right. Sit tight, Rex. We'll be back with you in a second. And also, though, that being said, anything you have to say as we're kind of doing the show, feel free just to jump in anytime, because your line will remain open. Here with me in the studio, Holly Hogan, writer and wildlife biologist, author of Message in a Bottle, Ocean Dispatches from a Seabird Biologist. Holding up the book. I don't know why, you know the book, but I'm showing you the book.
I recognize
You're
it.
like, yes, I recognize this. Adam, I wrote it. Why are you showing it to me? When was this book out? Just 20,
last year, 2023.
Right? Yeah, 2020.
So it's a year old.
I already feel like it's 2025 for some reason. I don't know why. Not that I'm trying to will away time here.
Yeah, don't do it.
No, look.
Every year becomes more precious.
It really does. Tell us. Folks would have probably heard about your book before, and it's words gotten around. But just in case. Give folks the over-under on this thing.
Right. So the book is basically a combination of memoir and travel adventure, but it really, all of it, I want to bring the reader on with me to the seabird colonies that I've been to oceans far and wide, because my work has taken me as a seabird biologist from Antarctica to the Arctic and everywhere in between. And so a lot of the things that I've been seeing in the ocean, particularly the obvious things with respect to plastic, and there's some specific incidents that really were moments of stark concern.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do in the book is bring the reader with me to experience these really cool places and to travel the oceans with me. And as I learned as I went, I want the reader to learn as well about what's going on out there, how plastic and climate change are affecting the oceans, and what's being done about it and what we can do about it. So I was really driven by the impetus to make people aware of what's going on in places where they wouldn't necessarily see. Yeah.
What's it been like since the book went out?
Like, in what way?
For the reaction folks have given to it, and also even if folks haven't read the book, just the fact that they know you've written it and the people you might run into, like what are your conversations like post-book compared to perhaps before?
Well, the best response I've gotten to the book, and I've received it several times, and it's the reason I wrote the book, so this is why I'm so thrilled to get this response, is I had no idea. And you've really made me think about the way I use plastic and the way I think about plastic and the ways to avoid it and what it's doing not only to the marine environment, to our own bodies, and how huge a part of climate change plastic is, which a lot of people don't get that connection. And the plastic industry wants to keep everybody ignorant on that front.
You're listening to The Signal full call-in show today, folks. We're asking you, what changes have you noticed in the ocean, the salt water around where you've grown up in Newfoundland and Labrador? So changes over the years that can do with soil erosion, anything in and around with the water. And also we're talking about solutions today, if you've got ideas around that. The phone lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. I've got two guests here. Holly Hogan, you're just listening to there, writer and wildlife biologist, here with me in studio. Rex Hallwell, manager for Nunatsiavut Operations, named with Smart Ice. Here's a question for you both. Rex, I'll start with you. When you were growing up, do you remember when climate change or global warming or some idea around that kind of first came into your brain for just understanding and thinking about it? Like for me, I remember acid rain in the 80s, right? And like this was the thing it was the big thing growing up. I'm 44 now, so in the 80s it was like acid rain. But then I think as I got older, the Kyoto Protocol came up, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, and I started to but even then it felt like far off. So that's me. Rex, what about yourself?
Yeah, no, like growing up, I've heard of like you said, the Kyoto Protocol and acid rain, but being in Northern Labrador, those things are far removed from people here living in Nain. So that's kind of like a myth. So what really stands out for me is I can remember growing up in Nain. I remember a Christmas day, after the excitement of unwrapping your presents, me and my uncle on Christmas Day, we got in a skidoo and on a kummerik, and we took the garbage from our house and we traveled on the sea ice to harbour to throw the wrapping paper away. And this was 45 years ago. I can remember traveling on the sea ice in the harbour, when I was 7. But nowadays, December 25th, it's still open water. So climate change we're seeing to the effect in my 45 years, but what really, and I think a lot of people in Maine, like climate change was always kind of happening, but what really sticks out in people's mind was back in 2009 and 2010. In those 2 years, we had rain in the middle of February. So that really hit home, I think, for a lot of people, that climate change was real because it affected us locally. I mean, we had rain in January, middle of February. It's supposed to be like minus 45 with the wind chill, and we had rain, for like 4 or 5 days straight, which we've never seen before. But it really nailed it down to us that climate change is real. It's affecting us real locally. And what happened is a lot of people, we travel on the sea ice to hunt and fish, like I mentioned earlier before. But because of this rain, and it rained a lot, like there were brooks breaking open, and the sea ice, it was flooded in rain. But then the cold weather came back, and then what it done is essentially flash froze all the water on the ice, and we had a giant skating rink. So, there were new conditions that we've never encountered before, and a lot of people with the traditional knowledge of how to travel on the sea ice, some of that traditional knowledge they couldn't use reliably because we're encountering new things that would never have happened in the past. So with these new climate change affecting our areas, people have to adapt. So, I mean, and that's the whole thing that we have to do. People in general and Inuit in general have always adapted to new situations, but now we're adapting to things that we haven't seen before. So we need to adapt to climate change, what we're seeing locally, and people are realizing, climate change is a real thing because we are seeing it in our communities, but we're seeing it to the extent that is new altogether. So it's affecting us more than people realize.
What's it like for folks to process the grief and stress and pressure around that reality in the community when you have a time when cultural knowledge is obviously kind of changing a bit because things have changed for the understanding of how things have always worked?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like when you encounter new things, especially on sea ice travel, people rely on the sea ice to safely get them to go hunting to help offset the high cost of living, to be able to go out and get a seal or a caribou or a fish. If you can't travel over the sea ice safely, people either won't do it, so that'll just lead to the cost of living. They'll have to rely more on the stores, like for the cost of a tank of gas in your snowmobile on good sea ice. A person can go out hunting and get a seal or a caribou or char, and for a good sized seal, if the ability for them to travel on the sea ice safely to get that seal and to come home safely and to feed their family that seal meat, for 3 or 4 days straight for that price of a tank of gas, that's not going to have the same stretch as somebody running down to the local store and getting maybe 2 pounds of ground beef, a pack of chicken legs, and a small bag of rice for the same cost. It's not going to be cost effective because they can't do it, or people will sometimes take the chance and they'll put themselves in danger to get this food or do what they may. But it also they have to consider they're putting themselves at risk, but they also have to they may be putting the rescuers at risk as well. So it's a lot of thinking that people have to do, trying to adapt to these new things. Either the cost of living will go up, or the cost to other people's safety may go up. So it's kind of a switch that people have to decide on.
Can I just ask, Rex, aside from transportation, it must really be affecting your ability to hunt, because a lot of the hunting would be from the ice, right? For hunting for seals, like you need the ice in order to hunt for marine life.
You're entirely right that the ice is imperative for us to be able to go out and hunt. Nain, like I mentioned before, Nain, or maybe not here, but Nain is on a peninsula. We're surrounded by hills and valleys, so it's not easily like up in Nunavut. Some communities can travel for miles in and around their community because it's nice and flat. Here is not the case in Nain. If that sea ice isn't there, the people can't go out to hunt. The big thing is with snowmobiles as opposed to boats. Snowmobiles are more easily accessible for people who may not be better well off than other people who have boats. Snowmobiles are more easily available and they're a lot cheaper to fix than a boat. So, I mean, the accessibility of the sea ice, it's more accessible to the more people, to more people, because it's easier to get a $2,000 snowmobile and maintain it than a boat that'll be more expensive to maintain, and traveling on the sea ice is going to be a lot safer regardless of the weather, minus the cold. So, I mean, the availability of the sea ice, it makes it easier to access, to give people access to hunting, to fishing, to help offset the cost of living. So you're right in that sense, yes.
Let's go to the phones. We've got Dick Whitaker on the line. So, folks, the lines are open. Full call in today, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. The signal at cbc.ca for emails. We're asking, what have you noticed in changes in the ocean and the salt water around Newfoundland and Labrador? Any crack or cranny of it, what you've seen. And that could be also because of something you've noticed with marine wildlife as well. And we're asking you about solutions, too. Mr. Whitaker, thanks for calling. Thoughts today?
Well, you have something of mine on later on, but one of the things that is really biting home, and the people in the north are the victims in a way, as being explained right now. But people here are not accepting responsibility, personal responsibility for their role in things, and they keep buying excessively large vehicles. The car companies and so on pander to it. Not only that, they push it like hell, and we don't need that, and it's spilling over into the electric vehicles as well, and that will make the ability to produce enough power to charge them in the future. It puts it in jeopardy, because the bigger the vehicle, the larger the battery you need, and all this kind of stuff. So, we need to somehow find ways to force people to face the reality. And personally, I believe that the government has it in its hands in the terms of taxation and what you have to pay to license a large vehicle if you don't need it. There's obviously cases where you do, and that sort of thing. But, the tools some of these tools are in government's hands. The other ones are to try and make people say, look, this is not someone else's problem. This is our problem. We've got to engage. And I'll leave it at that, because people need to have some new ideas of how to get people to take that responsibility.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your call as always, Dick.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Dick Whitaker there, calling from Portugal Cove. So, like I was saying, folks, if you want to add your voice to, if you want to add on to what Mr. Whitaker was saying or anything else you're hearing, the lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. We got an email in from Peter Noel. This is one so it came in earlier this week in response to Monday's show, right? Because we had young folks in talking about activism and advocacy and lobbying. And here's what Peter had to say. He said, "Hi, Adam. I caught a bit of your show today. Excellent. I really admire the young activists you interviewed and wish there were more like them. My advice to them is to stop being polite. I suggest they read about civil disobedience tactics used by Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King. The vast majority of my work during my 35 career in the offshore petroleum industry related to the prevention of major disasters. Having worked on the Ocean Ranger, I took my work rather seriously and have studied dozens of major man-made disasters, both in the offshore industry and in other industries. Obviously, I have a fair bit of training and experience in risk management based upon this background. It is my opinion that the climate crisis is far more serious and immediate than people believe it to be. This global man-made disaster has already started and will accelerate far faster than most people think. Global warming in the last 2 years has outpaced all the models, and the frequency, duration, and intensity of extreme weather events continue to rise. Yet, we continue to pump more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. To use the analogy of an offshore production facility, we have ignited gas leak, and rather than shutting down production, we are increasing it. We are processing full speed ahead on a dark, foggy night in our uncharted and ice-infested waters. My educated guess is that the probability of major global consequences in the next 5 or 6 years is unacceptably high. We are playing Russian roulette with civilization. Thanks for your good work, Peter E. Noel. Peter, thank you for that email. Here with me in studio. Well, I've got a guest on the line.
Bursting at the seams.
I could even feel it. I wasn't even looking at you, Holly, and I could feel the energy. So Holly Hogan there. We've got Rex Hollowell on the line with Smart Ice. Holly Hogan is here, writer, wildlife biologist. Any thoughts from Mr. Whitaker or to the email or anything else?
Both together, actually, having to do with personal responsibility. First of all, education is really important, and knowing what is happening, knowing the impacts that we're having. And we are living in an age where not being completely honest and from politicians, it's become an accepted norm. So the power is in knowledge and understanding what you need to do. So in terms of personal responsibility, I mean, there is so much we can do. First of all, getting ourselves educated, but also going to the note that you just read. Yeah. He's absolutely right. I mean, Antonio Guterres, who is the head of the United Nations, said, you cannot put out a fire spraying gas at it. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that's what our province is doing. And by Mr. Whitaker said, the government could be using taxes. And that's exactly what the carbon tax was going to do, collect money for the use of carbon and turn it into solutions to the problem. Unfortunately, our premier has decided, even though the federal government was going to give us back most of that money, he has decided that to run against that policy.
Yeah, and the provinces, for the carbon tax, the provinces had the option to have a province-led decision around it, like they do in British Columbia, like they do in Quebec. This province decided not to, so then the federal government brought in what they're doing, which is why we get checks 4 times a year. And depending on how much carbon you burn, that comes down to the math of whether you're getting money in or having money go out.
Right, and it's equitable. Like you can choose to use less, and we all do, right? When the price of gas goes up at the pump, we tend to go, well, can I do these 4 trips in one rather than going separately, and that kind of thing. But also, to me, this is a really great news story that the Persephone, which was the offshore exploration project from ExxonMobil and Qatar Energy in the Orphan Basin, we just found out this week that the 3 billion barrels of oil they were hoping to encounter there did not pan out.
Yeah, they drilled a dud, right? So
which to me is great, because I said to my sister the other day, and this is, I love to spread this information because Andrew Furey, our premier, keeps talking about our offshore industry as being green. And what that really means is that during production, getting it out of the ground won't be flaring. So there'll be a couple of, that's a great step if it was done 50 years ago. We are so far past that now.
Because the concern for a lot of folks in this conversation will be what they call downstream, right? So yes, fine, there have been reductions in how it gets produced and drilled for, sure. But then at the end of the day, as it's refined and put into vehicles and everything else, that is still carbon being put out, and there's nothing green about that.
There's nothing green about it. So for the Persephone, 3 billion, I did the math, would be 1.3 billion tons of carbon emissions in the atmosphere that we would be responsible for. Speaking of taking responsibility. So my sister said to me, well, that sounds like a lot, but what does that mean? So I tried to find an analogy. And so the best one I could come up with is if you took a regular passenger vehicle and drove it along the equator, so the diameter of the planet, it would have to do that 250 million times, or 250 million cars driving around the entire planet. That's a lot of carbon, and that's one project that luckily isn't happening. But I think we have to stop or get our head out of the sand, or stop listening to the false information we're being given. And that's where the power is. If you realize how negative the offshore the industry is on our climate change issue globally, then you have power to do things. You can support the carbon tax. You can take your investment money out of oil and gas and related industries. Like, you have a lot of power.
You're listening to The Signal. It is Climate Week, day 4 of it. Here's a note we got from Jane and Brian Yeager, friends of the show. Hi, folks, by the way. Hello, Adam. We use the term climate crisis versus climate change because it is truly a crisis. We decided to stop buying plastic shampoo bottles over a year ago.
Yay.
I thought you'd like that. We make shampoo bars with a group of like-minded friends, better than liquid shampoo. I wish Holly Hogan's book will become required reading at schools. How can this happen? Great question, Jane and Brian.
I wish I knew the answer to that one.
Well, folks, if you got thoughts on it, if you're with the Department of Education, you want to call us, 709-722. And for any of you, if you want to join this conversation, the lines are open, right? We're asking what you've noticed for changes in and around the ocean, the salt waters of Newfoundland, off the coasts of Newfoundland and Labrador. And we're talking solutions too, right? Whether that's for mitigation, adaptation, or climate solutions. The lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Emails, thesignal@cbc.ca. Gerard Neal is on the line here now. Gerard, thanks for calling. Oh, hi, Gerard.
Hey, thanks.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How yourself?
Good, good. Thanks for that package you dropped off, by the way.
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to talk about it?
Sure. I'll quickly explain it. So in terms of activism, I'm a part-time activist. It's sort of like a side hustle. I don't make any money from it, but I make these Newfoundland souvenirs out of natural fiber rope. You have them there in your hand. It's a circular piece of rope, and it's referred to as a withe. That's one way to spell it. Withes are used in the old fishery. They would be used to hold your oar to the toe pin, or you might see it around the mouth of a lobster trap. But basically, it's a circular piece of rope.
And it's beautiful and very sturdy looking. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So there's a gag that goes with it. So what happened was I found a withe once and tried to figure out what it was, and then learned how to make one. And then as I was looking at this and also seeing all the news about how plastic rope is the number one polluter in our local waters, as told to us by the Munn professor who studies that, I thought this would be a cute way to make an argument against plastic rope. So natural fiber rope has been around for over 3,000 years. We have used rope this way all through history, and then all of a sudden, as soon as the oil industry kicks in and plastics are invented, almost all rope is now plastic. So there are presently around 70,000 people in the Atlantic fishery, and almost 201 they use synthetic or plastic rope. So I have this small activist thing I do. I go to World Oceans Day and other little things like that, and I write letters to ministers and all the usual stuff an activist does that virtually produces no result. Except in my case, what I'm talking about, there's an immediately available resolution to a big problem. So we have natural fiber rope. It's existed forever. Why don't we just outlaw, like legally outlaw, the making of plastic rope, subsidize the rope makers in the world, convert the industry back to natural fiber, create agricultural jobs, and make rope that way? And now instead of having ghost nets and plastic rope everywhere, you've now eliminated one part of the problem. And it's not like I'm trying to make something up. This rope has existed and will do the job. So what happens is, as someone who's doing this, and when I go to these events, World Oceans Day, for example, there's not a single person who disagrees with this. Not a single person. It's not like 80% think. It's 100%. Everybody says, yes, it's too much. We've got plastic in our semen. We've got plastic in our brains. We've got plastic everywhere. So let's work against it. So here's a solution, and yet it will not happen. I can guarantee you that I am now a confirmed and unapologetic cynic, because as a young person being idealistic and trying things through my whole life, I'm realizing that's complete BS. There's not going to happen. So in my case with this rope, if there's nothing to get in the way and it's not happening, then how do you expect any of that, all the other big stuff to change?
Yeah, you're like, this seems doable. Everyone agrees, or the folks you're talking to, anyways. But yet here we are, and then to think of the, some of the more difficult stuff, of course. Gerard, thanks for this call. Thanks for the dropping off the package, and your input's really appreciated here today. Go ahead.
I would also like to, so there's this whole notion of a circular economy. And the answer to why nobody is doing this now is because plastic is so cheap.
Yeah.
But when you shut the valves to oil and stop producing all the plastic, and this is actually in the position paper from the federal government, it becomes a valuable commodity. It's not something that the oil industry provides ad nauseum at very cheaply. And there's this whole concept of the circular economy that is exactly this. It's going back to the basics, reusing things, redesigning things, and they never become waste, or they either biodegrade or are continually upcycled. So it means producing things differently. But this would be a perfect part of that solution.
Thanks again, Gerard.
Great. Okay, you're welcome. Thanks so much for the call.
Cheers. Yeah, I love it. So Gerard emailed earlier in the week, and I was like, you know what? Everything you're saying is perfect for you to for us to chat with you later when we've got Holly and Rex, you here and Rex on the line, right? Because it fits so well with the discussion and a solutions oriented and just thinking of a big part of the problem. I'm going to dip back in with Rex now up in Nain. Rex, any thoughts on what you've been hearing so far? And if yes, great, share them. And I also have a couple other questions for you.
Yeah, well, just to go back to the whole, if it's green or not, the thing is, with climate change, and especially, I'm going to be biased on the Inuit population, the Inuit population is quite small. We're probably, in all of Canada, there's probably less than 70,000 Inuit. So the effects of climate change, we are a very small population that is contributing to climate change. But we are going to be seeing some of the greatest effects of climate change in regards to our sea ice. And a lot of people don't realize that. Don't get me wrong, climate change is going to affect everybody. But with what we're seeing with this shortening of our seasons, for the amount of the really small footprint that we have of contributing to climate change, we're going to be some of the greatest people who are affected by climate change. Like the ice season that we're seeing here in Nain, like I mentioned before, when I was younger, the ice would come in as early as December. But now with climate change, what we're seeing now is that the sea ice is coming in a full month later. The sea ice isn't happening until the middle of January. So if the sea ice is taking a month later to come in, it's not getting as cold, so the ice isn't getting as thick as it used to be back then. And so concurrently, we're having a shorter sea ice season. So again, for a very small population, especially here in Labrador, it's affecting us to the extent that our sea ice is shorter by at least 2 months. If it's a shorter at the month at the beginning, the ice doesn't get as thick. It's going to break up and leave a lot quicker. So it gives those people the ability to travel on the sea ice. It's too much shorter than what it used to be, again, 40 years ago. And talking about oil and gas, and I mentioned somebody will go and get it for a tank of gas to get these animals, but other people don't realize for the stores to get chicken and beef and fresh vegetables, they burn fossil fuels to get there. Yeah. So I mean, for the ships to come into Nain to deliver all the food to the communities or by plane, it's if you think about it, and the storage of the food in the coolers and in the freezers, it's actually greener for Inuit to get that tank of gas to go out and to hunt, natural food. And that's the other side of it, the seals, the caribou, the char. It's not processed. It's GMO-free, whatever terms you want to use is healthy. It's 100% healthier than what's in the stores. But on the green side of it, it's a lot more greener for just that person to get a tank of gas to go out and get these animals, and as opposed to the stores burning electricity to keep it cold and ship it up there, is actually greener for Inuit people to just go to hunt and get the food. And again, like the ability of and the sea ice getting shorter to travel on it is just going to contribute to more fossil fuels being burned in community, because people can't go out and get the food, and we have to expend more energy to get the food up to the north and keep it cool and for the people to buy it. So, and then that's what some people just sometimes need to think and realize.
That's Rex Hallwell there, manager of Nunatsiavut operations in Nain with Smart Ice. Here with me in studio, Holly Hogan, writer and wildlife biologist. You're listening to The Signal, where it's day 4 of Climate Week here. If you want to join the discussion, the lines are open, full call-in show. We're asking what you've noticed in and around the salt waters of off the coasts of Newfoundland and Labrador over the years, and also we're talking solutions when it comes to around climate change and the climate crisis. 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Text us, 709-327-8206. thesignal@cbc.ca is the email. We have a follow-up note from Dick Whitaker here. He says the town of Portugal Cove converted a lot of its pickups to electric and are en route to converting more vehicles, so they should be congratulated as they're first in the province to do this, right? So you're looking at more action, local action, with respect to climate change. Holly, thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Rex was just saying about Arctic ice, and it's so critical to the Inuit life. But it is important actually to life on the entire planet, which is something people don't realize, because the formation and the melting of Arctic and Antarctic ice, the annual cycle, impacts all of the ocean currents around the world, and the circulation of oxygen, nutrients, and the growth of algae and fisheries. All of it hinges on this conveyor belt, this deep cold water conveyor belt that starts in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So for people who think, oh, well, the Arctic and Antarctic ice doesn't affect my life, it absolutely does.
And this matches with what, so we had climatologist Joel Finnis on the show yesterday, right? And Joel was on, I know you know this, but Joel was on saying how the last couple of years, sea surface temperatures off the charts. So much so, they're like, folks are trying to figure it out, right? What is it, like, how has it gone this high? What does it mean? And what does the future around this mean with what is happening?
Can I just tell you something really interesting that's happened this year? I'm sure everybody has noticed a change in water temperatures, and I was going to ask Rex actually if he's seen a difference in fish species that have made it up to Nain. But in the meantime, I know that there have been a lot of problems over the last several years with gannets at Cape St. Mary's and other colonies, but because they're here for so long, from March to end of October, that they depend on capelin like everything else, but they depend on herring before that, mackerel after that, and they go through the list of species that appear during the season. And mackerel is an important part of the later season food source. And in recent years, like in the last, say, 10 years, gannets have been leaving their chicks unattended because they cannot find the fish to feed the chicks, and they need to leave, which is unprecedented. So I've been feeling kind of sad about that. But I was talking to Chris Mooney at Cape St. Mary's this year, and he said that this species called Atlantic saury, or they're also known as billfish, they're a southern sort of Gulf Stream fish. And they've been seen in huge numbers in the last 2 years, and gannets are actually taking advantage of that. So there has been some, at least short-term, really positive effects of these new species moving in. And we saw the same thing in Witless Bay a couple of weeks ago with Joe O'Brien. We were out, and there were feeding frenzies of tuna and seabirds. And so I don't know how it's all going to pan out, but right now, the unexpected consequences are sometimes positive.
Some of this came up yesterday as well. We had Carissa Brown, a professor of biogeography from Memorial University, talking about how through the geography department here, looking at species moving further north because of what's happening, because of the climate change and what is happening, and then trying to see how some are doing better than others and what it all means, and just really kind of plays into exactly what you're saying there as well. Rex, what have you noticed in and around Nain for either species sticking around longer or things you haven't seen before that have not typically come that far north? What kind of things have you seen?
Well, fish-wise, I know I have a couple of friends who work out, do some fishing off the Labrador shelter, and then they're saying because of climate change, because of Greenland melting and fresh water coming in, the water's getting warmer, they actually have to go a bit deeper to their fishing grounds. Whereas before, where the water wasn't as warm and we weren't affected by the fresh water from Greenland, they're seeing the effects out in cod when they go out cod fishing and fishing for crab. They're noticing because of the temperature warming up, the crab are going up in deeper water, so they themselves are having to go to get these crab in deep waters. And for other animals, we're on the coast. We are seeing more species that that were natural to Labrador. I know gannets. You mentioned gannets. Gannets are slowly making their way up the coast. And even when I was going back to when I was a young guy again, moose weren't the thing up here in northern Labrador, but now with climate change and with it getting warmer, we're seeing more and more moose make their way north. So moose is becoming more of a frequent thing that we're seeing, whereas again 40 years ago we would hardly hear about moose. So it's not really affected, but we are seeing more and more not natural species that come to our areas, and it's just amazing to see, honestly, when you think of it. And like this year, we had an exceptionally warm spring, not really in Nain, but in the southern, when I mean like the north coast, the southern north coast, they had their, like in Goose Bay, I know I passed through there in April. Like in April, because of climate change, they essentially had no snow, which is going to lead to them having a different climate and possibly new species coming through that we've seen before. But it's happening here on the coast, not quite to the extent as other areas are seeing, but we are certainly seeing new species coming up, the effects of having to go farther with the warming sea oceans. And like I mentioned, the sea ice is getting shorter here. Like last year, we maintain a trail between here and Natchitoches, but because of we're seeing the warmer Decembers and the cold is happening, it's affecting our sea ice trail. At one point, the sea ice trail from Nain to Natchitoches, you could do it pretty easily, almost dependently every year on what we call the outside run. It's essentially on the sea ice going straight to Natchitoches. But last year, with how warm it was, we actually had to modify the change, that trail that actually went more inland than opposed to that outland route, because the sea ice wasn't there. There was a huge hole that it was a month later than what it should have formed. So because of climate change, because of that hole in the ice that didn't form, we actually had to modify a trail between Nain to Natchitoches. So again, climate change here is really affecting more of the sea ice that people depend on to travel on safely.
Here we got a note in from Don from Salmon Cove. There's an irony here. We agree to reduce carbon footprint by buying EVs, which are very expensive. China can sell us EVs for less than $13,000 Canadian. Our government decides to put a tariff, so they become very expensive. We should give it more thought. That's Don from Salmon Cove. Thank you for that note. Great food for thought there. If you would like to join this discussion today, day 4 of Climate Week on the Signal, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, like Don did, 709-327-8206, or email thesignal@cbc.ca. I've got 2 guests with me who've been with me for the whole show, and unless something weird happens, they'll be here until the end of the show. Rex Hall is on the line with Smart Ice and Holly Hogan. Rex is in Nain, and Holly's here in front of me in St. John's. Any thoughts, Holly, on that, or what Rex was saying?
I have a question for Rex. I'm really interested to know. I was working in the high Arctic in the Northwest Passage, and because it's opening up, the Northwest Passage is opening up. I was flying narwhal surveys, and they completely were changing their behavior because killer whales are making their way into the high Arctic because of this melting. And you could always tell when a killer whale was around because narwhals who were more or less dispersed through an inlet would all bunch up and gather up close to the shore. And so did the bowhead whales, which are huge whales, right? They're the size of right whales, 50, 60 feet long. So they were changing their behavior and, hunting narwhals, which is a new niche for them. And I'm just wondering if killer whales, if you're seeing more of them around the Nain and area, or any other species that are, because there was one, a tufted puffin. It was either a tufted or a horned puffin, but it's a Pacific puffin species, was seen in the North Atlantic, and clearly it had come across through. So I'm just like, when I do seabird surveys now, it's almost, you can throw out the distribution maps and just keep your eyes and open for any possibilities. Wow. So I was just really curious to know, Rex, if you're seeing things from the north as well as from the south that maybe you weren't seeing before.
Well, I know definitely people who are out in the boat in the summers. They are seeing more and more frequent the killer whales coming up and down the coast. Yeah. As if it's more frequent or not. I just know that people are seeing them more and more. But interestingly enough, thinking about it as well, I know people are always seeing more and more of the killer whales either swimming up or down the coast. But also talking to other people, some fishermen were catching. There seem to be catching more and more porbeagle sharks. So I don't know if it has anything to do with the climate, with more porbeagles coming up, or is something just with the boom in their population due to warming. I'm not sure, but I mean, with more and more frequent storms that we're seeing coming up from the states, kind of talking a little bit back, but like we are seeing more and more species come through simply because of the winds that we see from those tropical storms come from the states. It is more frequently because we are seeing the remnants of the storm instead of what they used to normally do. Instead of cut south of the island, they're actually progressing right through New Brunswick into Labrador. So because of climate change affecting those storms coming through, we are seeing more and more different bird species that aren't native to our area. But again, with the sharks and the porbeagles, it seems to be more common occurrence that we are seeing more instances of people reporting that they're seeing them here on the coast. Yeah.
So interesting. It's a real time of flux. You don't know what you're going to see.
Here's some note from Michael Bennett, just came into the show. Fishermen from St. Paul's tell me that they're getting lobsters from Nova Scotia. How do they know? Nova Scotia fishermen use a different notch in the tail to identify lobsters, which is, wild, right? And again, just we talk about how stuff going further north, lots of changes. What's from your book, Holly, or just observations you've noticed, what's something that really kind of strikes folks for when they talk about what they didn't know beforehand? When you're talking about plastics, the ocean, some changes, things that you've noticed. Because I know for me reading it, there's a bit about a polar bear eating a diaper. There's the sea turtle description. There's lots out like in the book that kind of really struck me. Yeah. But what's something that really seems to have resonated with readers of your book for like an example of like, oh my gosh?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have mentioned the polar bear incident, and this was in Killinick Island, Rex. You're probably familiar with it, in the northern tip of Labrador. There was a polar bear, a big pile of polar bear dung with a fully intact baby diaper in the middle of it, and And it was a kind of a shocking thing to see in such a remote place, and it just brought to mind like the impact of ocean currents and how things move around from their place of origin and the unexpected places that they find themselves. And the other incident was one Valentine's Day off the coast of New York City, and the ocean was littered in these Mylar balloons, which people give during times of celebration, right? And they all had, love you forever and be my Valentine. And they were all given in love and then probably romantically released into the air or accidentally released.
And they end up somewhere.
And they end up on the ocean surface, and a loggerhead turtle was trying to hunt it down because it looks just like a jellyfish. So this is what I mean by, I think everybody wants to do the right thing. So you need to be empowered to know, to know what that is so that you can move forward and do your best. And encourage your governments and industry to do their best.
Yeah, and that's as we kind of wind down on this show, right? It's so knowledge, to be involved, to encourage, like you said, governments to take more action around this. Rex, what are your thoughts around action or thoughts or what ways for folks to equip themselves for where we're headed?
Well, really, that's the whole intent of Smart Ice. But unfortunately, climate change isn't going to reverse instantly, and then we'll go back to the way it was 40 years ago. So here, because of climate change, Smart Ice was on it. But again, Smart Ice is what we're doing is we're not reversing climate change. We're adapting to climate change, which is really, I think the big discussion has to be how to adapt to climate change. So Smart Ice is enabling people, giving them information on how to adapt to climate change, which has to be a discussion worldwide. We have to cut down on our emissions, yes, but we also have to realize, unfortunately, it's not going to reverse. So with what we're doing at Smart Ice, which is we're adapting, we're giving data to the local people on how to keep them safe, on how to safely travel while adapting to the sea. And the governments have to realize that, we have to figure out these solutions on how to adapt to climate change, but also try to mitigate and to cut down the use on our carbon, on our fossil fuels. But the ultimate thing is we have to help people adapt and to survive and thrive while dealing with climate change.
Rex Hallwell, thank you for being with us for this show today, all the way in Nain. I really appreciate your input and just for you being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Holly, I've got to play one quick signal line, and then I'll thank you. So this is something completely different, folks, but Mary Dalton gave us a call, and I got to get it on today. So, John?
Hi, Adam. It's Mary Dalton leaving the notice that I sent by email. Mary Dalton's latest book of poetry, Interrobang, is being launched in the Cox and Palmer Second Space at the Resource Center for the Arts, LSPU Hall, on Thursday, September 19th, from 7 to 9 p.m. Special guest, Poet Laureate of St. John's, Mark Callanan. Everyone is welcome. Thanks, Adam. Bye-bye.
Mary, thanks so much for that call. And folks, anytime, if you got an announcement to make or you just want to talk about what's on the show, give the signal line a call and we'll play it during the show or towards the end. 709-576-5260. Holly Hogan, any last thoughts for today? About 30 seconds left.
Yes, I have 30 seconds worth. There's lots of research going on, lots into carbon storage, carbon sequestering, lots of industrial scale possibilities. So pay your carbon tax and be happy for it. And there are solutions down the pipe, and we absolutely have to adapt in the meantime.
Adapt, find solutions. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much for this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And folks, if you haven't read the book, Message in a Bottle, Ocean Dispatches from a Seabird Biologist, Holly Hogan. That is it for day 4 of Climate Week. Thank you so much for listening to us so far this week. If you still have thoughts on it, like the signal at cbc.ca, call the signal line and leave us a message, 709-576-5260. Also, to a couple of the other folks, like we had a note a couple days ago, I was reading Mund's Gazette and noticed the competition for locally eco-roasted coffee, a Good News Eco Story, local as well. That's the September 18th article of the Gazette. Folks, if you want to check that out, thank you for that note to myself and the Signal team. Tomorrow, you will meet folks who are helping to educate, inspire, mold young minds when it comes to global warming and climate change and the climate crisis. That is tomorrow. Until then, stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.